Hey guys, I'm back with a new video. In this video we'll see how we can perform form validation in Vue.js using Vuelidate. So first let us navigate to google.com and search for Vuelidate. So let us search for Vuelidate and click on the first link. So let's check out the official documentation of Vuelidate, and you can see it is a custom library used for form validation in Vue.js. Now there are other libraries as well that can do form validation for us, but in this video I will strictly stick to Vuelidate. So let me tell you what we are going to cover in this complete video. So in this video first we will set up basic validation using Vue.js, then we will add required field validation on our form controls, then we'll add type specific validations like validating an email, validating a phone number, checking for min and max length of certain fields, and more. Then we will see how we can create our own custom validators using Vuelidate. Finally, we will see how we can write our own async validators using Vuelidate. So what we are going to create is, we are going to create a simple bootcamp registration form where the applicant can register for the bootcamp by filling his or her details like name, email, location, contact number. We'll also extend it later with more fields, but let us stick with this for now. So for styling the form, I will be using materialized CSS. So you can find the link for the CDN in the course files. The link for the course files can be found down below in the description of this video. So let us create our project. So right on my desktop, let us create a new file and let us name this as registration bootcamp registration form. Let us open this. So before starting with the code, let us set up a Vue project. In order to install Vue, you need Node.js installed onto your system. So we will use the Node package manager that comes with it as a dependency management tool. So first we have to install the Vue CLI globally onto our system. So first let us open Visual Studio Code in this folder. So first we have to install the Vue CLI globally onto your system. So for that, go to your terminal and run the command npm install at vue/CLI-G. Now I already have it installed onto my system, so you can run this command to install Vue CLI globally. Now once the CLI is installed onto your system, to create a new project, navigate to your main folder, which in my case is bootcamp registration form, and run the command vue create, and in the current folder I want to set up the project, so I can say dot and press enter. Now it will ask for some things. So it says generate project in current directory, so say yes. Next it is asking for some preset, so let us manually select features. Now check the features that are required for your project. So we need Babel, we need the router, we don't require the linters, so you can remove that. So use history mode for router, yes. Where do you prefer placing config for Babel and ESLint? In dedicated config files. Save this as a preset for future projects? No. So now it is creating a project for us. So it will take some time to install. So meanwhile the CLI is installing, let us install an extension that will help us in inspecting our application state during development, and that is Vue devtools extension, which is available both as an extension on Chrome and Firefox. So let us check this out. On Google search Vue devtools and click on this link. For installing devtools for Chrome and for installing them for Firefox, you can click on this link. So I already have it installed onto my system. If you want to install it, you will get an option for add to Chrome. Click on that and you're good to go. So now the installation is done. Let us run the local development server by running the command npm run serve. So npm run serve, and you can see the application is getting served on localhost 8080. So now our project is running locally on our system. Let us start with the implementation. So let us kill the server and install the package that we will be using for form validation. So right inside the terminal, let us run the command. So let's kill it first and npm install Vuelidate and press enter. So now we have successfully added Vuelidate to our project. Let us rerun our server by saying npm run serve, and let us go to the src folder, and inside the main.js file right at the top, so we are importing Vue from Vue, and down below let us say import Vuelidate from Vuelidate. And to use it, we have to just say vue.use and pass on the Vuelidate package that we just imported like this. And let us go to our index.html file, and right below the title let us add the CSS file or the CDN for materialize CSS right here. So we are using 1.0.0-rc.2 version. So now we have set up Vuelidate in our project, and we have also added materialize CSS CDN in our project. Let us create a new component in the components folder, and I will name it as capital B bootcamp register.vue. bootcamp register.vue. And right inside the file let us scaffold the form component. So first let us define the template tag, and right inside the template tag let us define our register form. So we are having a div, and let us give this a class of bootcamp register. So class bootcamp register. Let us zoom this up, and a class of container as well. Then right inside this div let us define a form. Let us give the form a class of card panel, which is a materialize class, and green text to make the text green. And let us add a no validate option because we are going to validate using Vuelidate. Now right inside the form let us add a h2. Let us give this a class of center and say register for bootcamp. So let us define a div with a class of field, and inside this div let us add a label for the name field. So label name, and right next to it let us define the input field for name. So input type as text. Let us add a vmodel directive here. So v-model. So this is a directive, and let us set this to bootcamp.name. So we will be defining the bootcamp object on which we will set up our form controls, and we will be getting our values from that object. So you can see it says it creates a two-way binding on the form input element or component. So whatever the user will type in this input field, so the user will supply some value for name that will get reflected in our data model that we will be using to store the values that the user types in. Initially, the value for name field will be empty quotes. So we are doing two-way data binding using vmodel. So let us go here and set up our data model. So script, and here I can say data, that's a function, and here I can return an object, and inside this I can define a bootcamp object, and within which I will define a name property, set that to single quotes like this. Then let us have a placeholder here. So placeholder, enter the name, and let's add a blur event on the name field. So for that we can use at and then blur, and whenever the blur event happens on the input field, I can mark this form control as dirty, meaning that it is touched now. So whenever the user will blur on that field, which means that the user has touched that input field, so a dirty flag for that input field will be turned to true by Vuelidate. So in order to mark this as dirty, let us learn about $v values. So what does this $v represents? Now this $v is an object that Vuelidate exposes in our Vue model that holds the validation state. Now this $v object represents the current state of validation of your form controls. So any field like this input field, for example, for which you define validations, Vuelidate will monitor the state of each of your form controls for which you set up validations. So for all the form controls that we want to validate, let us first define a validations object. So right here we can define a validations object. For now let us keep it as empty, and let us come to this blur event on the name field, and here I can say $v dot bootcamp dot name dot $touch, and let us invoke it like this, and we will define the validations for each of our form controls in just a minute. So validations go here. Right inside this object let us define a name attribute and set that to the name of component, which in our case is the bootcamp register component. So name, set that to bootcamp register let us set up the data on which our component is modeled on. So right inside here we have a data function which you can see is returning an object, and inside this object we already have set up the name property. So here we are setting up the initial value of our form controls. So for the initial state, name field is set to an empty string. Let us define another property, email, set that to empty string, location and phone number. So location, set that to empty string, and phone number, set that to an empty string as well. Let us also define a feedback property, and in the start let us set that to an empty string as well. Now once our registration is done, we will set up a success feedback, otherwise we will keep it as an empty string only. So now comes the validations object. Right here we are going to define our validators, where we will set up the validations for each of our form controls. So right here let us first use the VueLidate's core validator required. So first let us go right above and import that. So import required from VueLidate/lib/validators like this. So in all we have the 4 form controls. So for each form control let us add the required validator for now. So we can say bootcamp, and inside the bootcamp we have our 4 form fields. So for name let us set this to required. So this is our first core validator that we are using for the name field, indicating that the name field is a required thing. So let us copy this and paste it down below 3 times. So email is also required, location, and next is phone number. Both are required as well. I will also show you how you can define your own custom and async validators in this video. But before, let us go over some of the core validators that VueLidate ships with to understand how it does the form validation for us. So here we are setting up the bootcamp object, and we are setting up our model fields inside the bootcamp object. So we have added our validators. So currently we are using the core validator required on each of our model fields, namely name, email, location, and phone number. So let's go back to our template and finish the markup for the form along with setting up the validations right inside the template based on the state of our form controls. So let's go right above. So once the blur event occurs on the input field, which is the name field, we are manually invoking the touch method on our form control that we can access using this special $v object that holds the current state of validation, and on this $v object we can access the bootcamp object, then the name property, and on it we can invoke this $touch method to make the field dirty. And this is possible because we have already added this validations object, and this represents the current state of validation that the $v object or VueLidate is monitoring. So here we are marking the field dirty on the blur event, and let us define a template tag here, and let us use a condition. So I will say vif. So vif is a directive for conditional rendering if the name field has some error, which we can access by saying $v, that represents the current state of validation, .bootcamp, which we are monitoring, .name, $error. If the name field has some error, then the markup within this template tag will get rendered. So here we are checking for errors. Now if we do have errors, let us check for the required validation. So if the user intentionally leaves the name field as blank, then this error message will be rendered on the screen. So let us say p and vif. Let us give this a class of error message, and let us use the condition not $v dot bootcamp dot name dot required. So it says that the name field is required. So this field, if the user intentionally leaves this field as blank, then there will be some error in the field indicating that the name field is required, but the user didn't specify anything. This will get evaluated to true, and then it will render name is required. And once the user fills some characters in the name field, it will immediately go away. So this error message will go away once the user fills some characters in the name field. So let us copy this above div down below and change this to email input type as email vmodel bootcamp dot email. So this we are getting from right here. So bootcamp dot email, which is currently empty string, placeholder, enter the email, and on the blur event we want to make the email field dirty. So let's check for an error on the email field and the required validation on the email field. So change this to email is required. So for email, I will also use a core validator that Vuelidate ships with to check whether the user did enter a valid email or not. Also, I will show you how we can define our AnythingValidators on the email field to check whether the email is already in use or not. And for that, I will set up a fake JSON server. So no worries about that. We'll see it later in the video. So let us quickly add the core validator email for the email field as well. So let's go down below and import email. So now let us register this core validator on the email field next to the required validator. So email. So let us check right here whether the user did enter a valid email or not. So if the user did enter a valid email, then it will pass. Otherwise, the following error message will get displayed. So let's copy this down below and change this to email dot email. So we are checking whether the email field or the email form control that is defined on the bootcamp object that we are monitoring is an email or not. So if it is not an email, you can say email is invalid. And if it is an invalid email, then this error message will get rendered in the browser. Now before testing the functionality, let us add one more core validator called as numeric. So let us again copy this markup that we defined for the name field right here. Let me zoom this out and let us change this to location. So vmodel bootcamp dot location, placeholder, enter the location, and on the blur event I want to make the location field dirty. So let us check for error on the location field and change this to required validation for the location field. So location is required. So let us see whether this entire thing works or not. So let us register this component in our app component. So let's go right inside the app component and let us remove this router thing for now. So because we are not using it in our app. Bootcamp register. So we'll render our bootcamp register component right inside our main app component, and let us add the script thing. So we are exporting this object. So this is the app component. Let us set a components property and set that to bootcamp register. Let's import it right here. So import bootcamp register from @/components/bootcamp register like this. So let us go back to the browser to see what we get. So you can see we are getting a form. Currently it is not looking so good. So let us improve the styling a bit. So let us go inside the bootcamp register.view component, and right here let us define the styles for our bootcamp register component. So these are the styles that are scoped to our bootcamp register component only, and if we later define any other form, these styles will not get applied to any other form because they are scoped to this component only. So bootcamp register, let us give this a max width of 600 pixels, a margin top of 60 pixels. Now let us select the H2 inside the form. Let us give this a font size of 2.4 ems. Then the divs with a class of field. So all the divs, all the 4 divs that we are having, let's give them a margin bottom of 16 pixels. And to the error message, let us give a color RGB 236 79 79. So it's slight red in color. Okay, so it is looking good. And let us test the functionality till now. So if I omit this field and don't specify anything, and let us press tab to move to the next field, you can see it says name is required, then email is required, location is required. Now once we type something, say nerdy dev, there it is gone. Then say the nerdydev@gmail.com, again there is gone for the email field, and say New York, and you can see this works great. So the required validation is working perfect. So let's go back. Now let us do the same thing for the last field, which is the contact number field, and here also I will set up the required field validation first. Later we will define a custom validator to ensure that the number that the user types in this field is exactly 10 digits long and no more. So let us copy this div field and paste it down below. Let us change this to phone number. So here I can say contact number, and here we can say bootcamp.phone number. Let us also give some IDs here, though we will not be using them, but because we are using the for attribute on the label, so we should definitely add the ID attribute on the input field corresponding to that label as well. ID location, ID phone number, and let us add the ID email right here, and ID name. Also let us check whether the email is a valid one or not. So we didn't check that validation. So let's go back to the browser to quickly check this out. So if I say the nerdy dev, you can see it says email is invalid. If I leave this empty, then it says email is required. So this also works great. Now for our contact number, let us change the placeholder. So enter the phone number, and on the blur event on the input field, we have to make the phone number field as dirty, and if there is an error on the phone number field, that is, say the required validation failed on the phone number field, then it will render phone number is required. Now right after this div, let us define a submit button for form submission, and if the state of the form comes out to be invalid, then we will disable the register button. And let's do that by binding the disabled attribute to $invalid property that is defined on the $v object. So I can say field center. Now right inside the div, let us define the button with a class of btn green, and if our state of validation is invalid, so if the entire form is invalid, then this button will get disabled, and if the form is valid, only then you will be able to register for the bootcamp. So register. So if the form state comes out to be valid, then the button will become active so that we can make a registration on form submission. So let us test this out. Before that, let us define a RegisterBootCamp method. So on the submission of this form, I want to run the method RegisterBootCamp. So let's go right above, and on the submission or on the submit event, let us run the method RegisterBootCamp that I will define in just a minute. And right after the data property, let us define the methods object and define a RegisterBootCamp method. And this will take on an event object. And also, to prevent the default behavior of form submission, we can here add the prevent modifier. So this is better instead of using event.prevent default. So this will prevent the default behavior of form submission and making sure that we instead submit the form programmatically. So let us define the RegisterBootCamp method and test whether this works or not. So right inside the RegisterBootCamp method, let us first access the $v object on our component and then invoke the $touch method to make the form controls dirty, which means they are now touched at least once by the user. So this $v.$touch and invoke it, and let us check for the validity of the form. So on the $v object, we have the invalid property, and let us negate this check. So this $v.$invalid. So here you can see we are checking for the validity of form $invalid, and then we are using a bang on it. So validity. So we are checking for validity of our form controls. Now let us log to the console.log form got successfully submitted. And let us also log the entire bootcamp that we just created or that we will just create to the console. So console.log this RegisterBootCamp. So let us go back to the browser to see this in action. Let us open the developer console and click on this rightward arrow, click on View and click on App, then the Bootcamp register component, and you can see the model or the data of our Bootcamp register component. Currently we are having an email field, a location field, a name field, a phone number field, and the feedback property. So let us type something in these fields, the nerdy dev. So you can see that whatever we are writing in this field is getting reflected in our model, in our data model for the component. And we also have this $v object, and inside this we have the Bootcamp object that we accessed on $v in our form. And if I click on this email field, you can see it says any dirty is true. If I typed something into it, the error is gone, and you can see the field is now valid. So $invalid flag for the email field is now set to false, indicating that the field is now valid. So our email validation is working great. Now let us type a location name, so London. So here you can see on the $model property we are getting the London value, and you can see the field is now dirty because we blurred on these fields. So now they are evaluated to true. And in the contact number field, you can see it says phone number is required because I just touched the field. So on the phone number, you can see it is now dirty and there is an error. That is why this is getting rendered in the browser. Let us write some things. You can see we are getting some value in the $model property of our phone number object, and now the field is valid and there is no error. So this works great till now. Now let us click on this register button because now it is enabled. Once one of the form controls is invalid, this is in disabled state. But once you have something inside this, then it gets enabled. If you click on register, let's check out the console. You can see we are getting an observer object. Here we are having the email value, the location, name, and the phone number being logged to the console. So let us go back to our Visual Studio Code. So let us go down below to our validations property and let us add more validators on our form controls that Vuelidate provides us, like min length, max length for example. So right here let us add a check for min and max length of our name form control. So we want that the name must be at least 3 characters long and at max 30 characters long. We can make use of the core validators of Vuelidate, which are min length and max length. So let us go right above and import them from vuelidate/lib/validators. So min length core validator and max length like this. And let's go right here inside the name field in the validations object, min length. So min length and pass 3 to this. So we want minimum length 3 for the name and a maximum length of 30 for the name. So now we have successfully added the min length and max length validators to our name form control. Let us go back to our template and check for min length and max length and render appropriate error messages if the validation for these two validators fail. Let us copy this and paste it down below 2 times. Let us add the min length validation here to ensure that our name must be of at least 3 characters in length. So name, and we are using the min length validation. And let us render a message, name must be at least 3 characters in length. Now let us add the max length validation, max length, name must be 50 characters in length or less. Okay, so I think we are using 30. Yes, so let us change this to 50. So let us go back to the browser to see if this works or not. So for the name field, if I say E and go to the next field, you can see it says name must be at least 3 characters in length. One more character, it still doesn't work. One more character, and if we go to the next field, you can see the error is gone. Let us exceed 50 characters. You can see it says the name must be 50 characters in length or less. Even if we go to the next field, the error will still persist. So you can see this works great as well. So now we are done with the required validation, the email core validator to check whether the email is a valid thing or not. Then we have also checked for min length and max length validation on our name form control. Now let us add one more core validator called as NumericValidator to ensure that the user enters only numbers in our contact number field. So if I go back to the browser, currently you can see we are able to type even text in the number field, and this is something that we don't want. So for that we can make use of the numeric validator. Let us go above and import it right here, and this will ensure that the user enter only numbers in our contact number form control, and we'll also define a custom validator to ensure that the phone number that the user enters is only 10 digits long. So let us register the numeric validator in our phone number field like this. So if our contact number is anything less or more than 10 characters, then the error message informing this will get rendered. If we enter exactly 10 numbers in our form control pertaining to the contact number, then the validation for this form control will pass, right? Right next to the numeric core validator, let us define a custom validator, and I will name it as ensure only 10 digits long. And this will receive some value that the user types in, and we can trim that value and then check whether the length is 10 or not. So if the length is 10, it will return true, else it will return false. Now let's go back to the template and add both our numeric validation and our custom validation to ensure that only 10 digits are allowed for the phone number form control. So right here, let us copy this P and paste it down below and change this to numeric. So if whatever the user wrote in the phone number field is not numeric, it is a textual data, then this error will get rendered, which is only digits are allowed. And to check for exactly 10 digits, we can copy this and paste it down below, and instead of numeric validator now, use our custom validator that we defined down below, which is ensure only 10 digits long. So let us copy the name and paste it right here, and let us change this message. Contact number must be 10 digits long. So let us head over to the browser to see what we get. Let us type in some text here. You can see it says only digits are allowed, and it says contact number must be 10 digit long. So let us change this to a digit. Now we are saying contact number must be 10 digits long. It is not saying that only digits are allowed, because now we are entering a number. Let us take this to 10. So 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, and you can see now the validation passes. So now lastly, I would like to cover the topic of AnythingValidators in Vuelidate. So for defining an async custom validator, we need to make use of some asynchronous operations to do some validation. So we will define an AnythingValidator to ensure that only unique email is used, which means that if an email is already taken, then that same email cannot be used for a fresh registration. So for this, what I will do is I will set up a fake JSON server, and we will set up a JSON file as the database, and it will run on a local server other than the port on which our application is running on. So our application, which is currently running on port 8080, will interact with a backend server that will run on localhost 3000, and I will create a JSON file that will store the bootcamp registrations that we'll make from the front end. So for this, let us install a package, and the name of the package is JSON server. So let me open a new terminal and let us run the command npm install JSON server. So now our JSON server is successfully installed. To get a starting database JSON file, let us run the command JSON server -- watch. So we'll run this command with the watch flag db.json, and let us press enter. So now our JSON server is running on port 3000. Let us check out the db.json file that this gives us, which is this one, and let us remove everything that is there in db.json and just add an empty array of registrations. So now our backend server is running. Let us go back to our code and define an AnythingValidator by registering it in the email property right inside the validations object in the email property. So right here, let us define our async custom validator unique email, and each time this will receive a value, and for any registration we want to make sure that the registration is a fresh one, meaning that once an email is already taken, then the same email cannot be used in a fresh bootcamp registration. So this will take on a value, and we need to check for the uniqueness of this value, which is our email. Once we define this validator in our template, we will receive a value right here, whatever the user writes in the input field, and we need to check for its uniqueness. So first I will check if the value is an empty string. So if the value that the user writes in the input field is an empty string, let us return true. And let us make an async HTTP call to our JSON server that is running on port 3000. For that, first let us install the package Axios. So let us close our local development server on which our frontend is running for just a minute and install Axios. So let us run the command npm install Axios. So now we have successfully installed Axios. Let us import the package right at the top, right here. Import Axios from Axios, and let us make our async HTTP call to get all the registrations from our db.json file, and let us decorate our unique email function with the async keyword. And then right here I will use the await keyword and make a get request to get all the registrations. So this will give us some response data. So const response await axios.get http:// localhost 3000/registrations. So currently our registrations array is empty. So I will show you how we can do a bootcamp registration from the form using Axios in just a minute. For now, let us complete this validator first, and then we will see how the create bootcamp registration and the unique email work in tandem with each other. Now let us store the response data that we get into a constant, and I will name it as registrations. So const registrations response.data. Now let us check whether the value that the user supplied for the email right inside the input field pertaining to email is already taken or not. So for that, I will use the find method over all the registrations that we will be doing from our form, and for each registration I will check whether I do have an email that matches with the one that the user just supplied. So let us store this in a constant, and I will name it as already done registration. So const already done registration. So all the registrations that we are getting from our server, for each registration that we got on that registration, I will check whether the email on that registration that we are currently on matches the one that the user supplied that we got right here. So now if we do have a registration with the email that we are trying to register, that is, the email is already in use, then let us return false, indicating that the email is not available for use. If already done registration, let us return false. And if the registration is a fresh one with an email not already taken, then let us return true. Now let us go to our RegisterBootCamp function, and let us also place an HTTP call to make a new registration before we test our entire code. So let us make a post request to localhost 3000 axios.post http localhost 3000 to the registrations to /registrations, and this time let us use promise based code instead of async await, and let us put all our data that we got from the form controls, that is the bootcamp object, and send it along with the request this.bootcamp. Once we make a request to our JSON server, the JSON server will auto generate an ID on a registration that is done in the backend. Now this code will return us a promise, so once that resolves, the handler within the then block will run. So .then response, and let us log the response.data to the console. So console.log response.data. Let us also rerun our front-end development server. So npm run serve. Let's head over to the browser to see what we get. Let us fill up our form. So Alex, email alex@gmail.com, Ireland, and some number. Okay, so it's 10 digit exactly. Let us submit the form. Okay, so let us check the console. You can see we are getting an object back where name is Alex, email is alex@gmail.com, location phone number, and you can see we are getting an ID as well that is auto generated by the fake JSON server that we are using. Let us check out the db.json file, and you can see we are getting a successful registration for the bootcamp. Now before testing out the functionality for our unique email thing, that is, if some other user tries to register with this same email, we should not allow such a registration to happen. For that, we need to define the unique email validator right inside our template. So we need to check for that validation. Let us go right inside our template, and for the email field, let us copy this down below and change this to unique email validator that we are using. And if the email is somehow not unique, that is, the email is already in use, then this should get rendered. Email is already in use. Let us head over to the browser and try to do a fresh registration with this very same email. So name the nerdy dev, and let us paste this same email here. Let us press tab. You can see it says email is already in use. So even if you fill this form completely with all the validations done, you can see that this will not allow us to register for the bootcamp because we are making use of an email that is already in use. Let's add Alex too. Now let us make a registration, and let us head over to our db.json file, and you can see we are getting a new registration here as well, and the email is also unique. So now once the registration is successfully done, we will get some response. So we are getting the registration back from the server, and let us reset the state of the bootcamp to its original configuration by setting each of our fields to an empty string. So this.bootcamp, and let us say this.create fresh bootcamp like this, and let us also use the same method right here. Cut this out, this.create fresh bootcamp, and let us create this method right here. So create fresh bootcamp, and this will return the same object that we were using earlier under the bootcamp in the data method. Let us put a comma here. Okay, so now there are no errors. So once the registration is now done, the form will get reset to its original configuration. And let us also set up the dirty flag back to false for the entire set of form controls, and this will reset the form to its original configuration, to its original state of validation. So this.v.bootcamp.$reset like this. And right after the console log, let us also add a feedback. Thanks for registering for the bootcamp. We will soon contact you. Let us go back to our template right at the top, and right inside the div and right above our form, let us add a p tag. And if we do have a feedback, so if let us render that like this. And once the form has been successfully submitted, let us set the feedback to an empty string right after 2 seconds. So set timeout. After 2 seconds, we'll set the feedback to an empty string like this. And let us add a catch handler if an error occurs. So console.error. So finally, let us again head over to the browser to check the overall functionality of the bootcamp registration form. So if I leave all the fields empty and try to submit, so let us see. You can see we are not allowed to submit unless we supply some values to our input field that are, of course, according to the validations that we have set up on our form. So it says name is required. So let us add a name, the nerdy dev, to say, then a email, the nerdydev@gmail.com. So you can see the email is not already in use and is also according to the format. Let us use a location, so United States, a contact number. If I type some characters, you can see it says only digits are allowed. Let us use digits, so 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1. And also let us verify that our min length and max length validations are working on the name field or not. So if I change this to th, you can see it says name must be at least 3 characters in length. Let us increase the length to more than 50 characters. You can see it says name must be 50 characters in length or less. Let us revert back to the nerdy dev tool and again submit the form. You can see a message popped up. It said the registration is done. The entire form is now reset to its original configuration. And if we go back to db.json file, you can see we are getting a new registration in our db.json file as well. So this was all about the video on form validation using Vuelidate, where we learned how we can do basic form validation using core validators that Vuelidate ships with. Then we also learned how we can define our own custom validators. And finally, we defined an AnythingValidator to handle the email already taken case. I sincerely hope that you liked the video, and in case you do, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. This would give me fuel to bring more quality content on the channel. Let's catch up in the next one.